Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And won't somebody think about the writers? WGA Strike. Remember that? That was a thing. It's still a thing. And we're going to talk about this because it's interesting. It looks like the directors and the actors are going to get theirs, but the writers might not get everything they're asking for, and there are some differences in the asks, I think, between the directors.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because, like San Diego, people are pulling out because they can't get actors or directors there, possibly, not because of the writers.
Yeah, and San Diego's looking pretty sad this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just going to be one giant cosplay contest or something, but because we know
there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we know there's not going to be a lot of comics there. Because there's really not a lot of comics at Comic-Con anymore. But we're going to talk about this. It's pretty interesting. And again, you know, this comes down to the asks, and this has been our point of contention, you know, since we began covering this, was some of what is being asked for. It's the same with the comic book unions. It wasn't that we were against unionizing if people feel like they're being treated unfairly or being overworked. It's the fact that almost invariably people, you know, start sneaking stuff in like, okay, well, we need editorial control over the comics.
Right.
We need this and that. We need to vote on whether or not our company publishes a thing. In this case, with the writer's strike, it was the writer's room. We need to guarantee a certain number of people they need to maintain their jobs. And it's like, that's just not viable. Right. And sometimes not smart. You get too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, but yeah, it's basically like you might need 10 writers, but you have to hire 20 because we have to keep all our people employed at the higher rates we're now asking for.
Yeah,
I do think that's a lot of the reason.
Yeah. So and again, you know, the studios, from the studio's point of view, they're going to satisfy the people they have to first. They need directors. They need actors.
They do need writers, but not to the point.
You do need writers, but not as many writers. And it could be argued if you're cutting back on the amount of content you're producing, which they all are, you definitely don't need as many writers.
Well, there's not as many directors as there are, but a lot of the directors and stuff, showrunners, they do writing as well.
Yes,
a lot of times they write their own stuff also.
Yes, and so they had to, like, you know, give up on their writing duties during the strike and all this stuff. So it's going to be really interesting. Again, it just shows that where I guess the writers are in the pecking order of things, and they're just not as important to the studios as the directors and the actors.
Well, not the numbers they want to. They're demanding.
Nope. So let's talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. You'll get a woohoo if you do.
Woo!
Yeah. So I got to give a hat tip to Bleeding Cool, which weirdly Bleeding Cool seems like they're going more center lately. I've noticed that their stories aren't as sensationalized, except for, you know, Rick and Morty updates, Justin Roiland, Free Future, better than ever. But aside from that, they're kind of going back to what they were at the beginning. And I think this is because the age of outrage is winding down. Mm-hmm. And I think that their owner is probably looking at them like, hey, the ad rates are really bad now, so please don't do anything that's going to fuck up our chances to make money. Please. But this was interesting. You read it this morning. Said heading into the writer's strike, there were public pronouncements that the unions would be standing in solidarity.
Yes. I thought it odd.
To hold the studios, networks, and streaming services accountable. But with the negotiations between the WGA and AMPTIP, the DGA has officially ratified, that would be the directors, its tentative deal with AMPTIP, and it appears the SAG-AFTRA negotiations are going well too. So here's a look at where things currently stand, why it seems like the WGA could end up going alone. So they basically are every rat for themselves.
Well, it's been interesting, though, because I don't know if it's still going on, but when the strikes started early on, the actors wouldn't go in either because they didn't want to cross the picket line, so that they shut down filming at locations. But I don't think that's the case now because they had, like, I know they were having a hissy because the one Kardashians doing American Horror Story and tweeted about being at work on that, and they were calling her Scab Queen and stuff like that. So I think the people they're still filming. Like, that lasted a couple days, you know, a couple weeks or whatever, and now they're back to we're going to film anyway.
Yeah. So I think it's basically. Again, I hate to be that guy, you know, but I think they got theirs, and I think the writers are going to have to go along.
Well, the actors haven't got theirs yet, but the directors, they did ratify their deal And they said that they got, now here's what's interesting. Some of the things they got were some things the writers were asking for.
Yes.
They got extensive advances regarding wages, global streaming residuals, safety, diversity, and creative rights. In addition, a new deal establishes minimum terms and conditions in 2 new areas, non-dramatic programs made for SVOD and high-budget dramatic programs made for AVOD. That includes new provisions reaffirming that generative AI cannot replace the duties performed by the union members. A lot of these things are what the writers were asking for.
Well, and again, remember, a lot of directors are also writers.
Right. But what I'm going to say, correct, I guess, because writers. But they weren't demanding, I don't believe, they were demanding that there was a minimum number of them had to be hired, even if they didn't need that many people hired.
Yeah, so that's where we're going to, and actually it was pointed out in some other publications outside of Bleeding Cool that is, again, this is the sticking point that we have in a lot of cases. People accuse us of being anti-union. We are not. I think if you're working under deplorable conditions.
I mean, I agree that the streaming rights was a huge issue. We've talked about it for years.
Yeah.
The AI is a huge issue.
The AI is an issue. Streaming rights are an issue because they basically use that. There was language that was written into contracts years ago that didn't take into account how streaming would, upset the apple cart. So back then it was like, oh, well, if it's on DVD, you get royalties.
Yeah, and they're trying to argue that putting it on streaming is different than DVDs and things like that. So it got people screwed out of money. So we've talked about it before. So I do agree with these different groups that it was an issue that definitely needed addressed.
Now, this is interesting, too, because a lot of people don't realize Fran Drescher is in charge of SAG-AFTRA. She's the president of SAG-AFTRA. She was actually taken to task by Twitter because she said they need to drop the vaccine mandates. Mm-hmm. But she's also fighting for the union, too. So, you know what I'm saying? So people always want to put people in the boxes where they are politically.
Well, yeah, they always want to, where they think they are. They don't even know where they think they are.
Yeah.
So, they haven't reached an agreement yet, but they're supposed to have it by the 30th. It looks like they're going to because they said that it's very positive, and they could just be saying that.
I've heard repeatedly that it looks like SAG-AFTRA is going to be fine. They're going to be fine.
They're saying they can't share it because it's very confidential, which is a good idea given what happened to the firefighters in Reedy Creek.
Right,
Don't share anything. I agree with them on this.
Yeah, they said that we will be able to bring the studios, networks, and streamers along to make a fair deal that respects your contribution to the industry. Now, again, when there's negotiating going on, it's just that's negotiating. It doesn't mean that either side is going to 100% get what they want. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times
that's how negotiations work.
Right. And a lot of times
politics used to work.
A lot of times what happens is you have to throw out what you want, what the other side wants, and then a lot of times you'll meet somewhere in the middle. One side might only get 25% of what they want, but that's better than 0%. And the other side might get, and just because they're in the catbird seat and they can kind of, wheel.
Yeah, once upon a time, that's how politics worked too. And everybody get in the office and they'd work together to come to some kind of agreement. Now they just get into office and start campaigning for the next election and then refuse to work with each other. And then the people that get hurt are like the voters.
The business of politics. So this is coming from the New York Times. This is just a day or two ago. They're talking about the directors ratifying their contract, but you get down into it, and they're even calling this out. Some of the writers' demands are more complex than those of the directors. Writers Guild leaders have described their dispute in urgent terms, calling this moment existential and saying the studios are seemingly intent on continuing their efforts to destroy the profession of writing. Writers Guild leaders called the deal that studios struck with the directors part of a playbook to divide and conquer, and they vowed to fight on. So, again, I think from the studio's point of view, and it might be a divide and conquer, I don't know. I think the studio's point of view is if we're going to cut deals, we're going to go down the line who is most necessary. They're going to get a deal first.
Right, directors, because they can do a lot of the writing. And a lot of them do the writing. So they could do double duty,
Yeah, and this is the problem. This is a fundamental problem I had with the whole writer's strike. One, the writers are making it out like they are paupers, like they're not making a lot of money. And I think it's like several $1,000s a week that they make. Now, granted, that's in LA. Okay, so that's what they're making out like they're going to be working at like Taco Bell or something if they're not, they don't get this deal. Some might be working at Taco Bell, I don't know. But the main problem I had with it, you had with it, was that they wanted to make sure that there were a certain number of people in the writer's room and they had to be of like a certain makeup. Mm-hmm. And it was like, that's not sustainable. It might be some of the most successful TV shows of all time maybe had a handful of people in the writer's room. and you have more control over the show.
But what basically happened was because of the pandemic and because of streaming, they hired way more people than was sustainable.
Yes.
It's not sustainable. They're shrinking the amount of shows. They're cutting back significantly because now the pandemic's over. They're not getting the money they were getting before. And when you take, cutting something in half, you cannot keep all the same writers. I mean, I'm sorry. That's just how it works. And therefore, they know there are a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So they're like, you have to still hire all of us and pay us more. And they're going to be like, no.
and that's when I kind of step in and I'm like, this is again, like with the Kickstarter union and the Image Comics union, when you want to have say over what the company publishes, at that point, you shouldn't be working for that company, or you go start your own company. In this case, these people, they know they're going to be out of work, so they're trying to get themselves a parachute. Same thing happened with a lot of journalists for a lot of these outlets, which actually caused the media outlet to implode faster than it would have organically because they had to pay people a lot more, or they had to buy people out to get them to go away so they could or they'd sell the company to get rid of them. You know what I'm saying? So this is not sustainable. So what's going to happen is we're going to have a lot fewer shows. And I don't think that they're going to get this one. They're not going to get this whole, we need 25 diverse people in the writer's room of every fucking show.
Yeah, no.
It's not going to happen.
The other things they probably will get, because they're giving them to the actors and directors, the residuals and all that. They're working something out with them. But the whole, mandated, you give us all this and more money and you have to hire us even though you don't need us. That's where they, they're not going to agree to that.
Yeah, so I mean that's why I think it's a lot more complicated with writers. Plus, there are a hell of a lot more of them, I think, and it can be argued there are too many of them. And this is going to be kind of a purge of that. But it is very interesting though that the directors and the actors are getting theirs, but they're not gonna say shit to the writers. They're probably gonna be like, "Hey, good luck, guys.
Yep,
sucks to be you, but we got ours." And at the end of the day, capitalism, that's how it kind of works, isn't it? Right? You get yours, and you're not responsible for somebody else getting theirs. So it is what it is.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add?
Nope, nothing I can think of.
All right, we got to wrap this up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.